ouch. You know the way something happens to you, you go, oh, don't like this, that's sore. And as I often say to clients, like life and business is a full contact sport. You are going to get hit, you are going to get hurt. You can't avoid it. And you're no doubt about it. Some ouches are going to be bigger than others. And I think, as we all know, life sometimes gives you a reality that you just don't want. You didn't ask for it. You felt you didn't need it. But I think the shift that starts when you stop fighting the fact that it's here and ask, okay, I'm going to accept this, even though I don't like it. But now what? What am I going to do? How can I turn this into an opportunity, for example? And I think that is something about life that maybe as humans, perhaps we can maybe see it as slightly inconvenient, that it doesn't always follow our plan. We can have a vision, a strategy, goals, it's all mapped out, 3 years, 5 years. And then the universe or life kind of goes, yeah, that's nice, but I'm going to do something completely different here now. The deal falls through, somebody leaves, business hits a major problem, relationship changes, you get news you just don't want, somebody you love dies. I think there's a very sophisticated psychological response that is available to us in times like those. And it's summed up by one word: ouch. Now, there might be other words there beginning with the letter F. And fair enough, because life sometimes requires that, because it does hurt. But I suppose that's what I want to talk about in this episode. And it's kind of a companion piece to my Monday email that went out a few days ago. This is last Monday. And I'm not somebody who's going to say, take a Pollyanna approach and reframe something that you don't like into, oh, look, everything happens for a reason and let's look for the positive and it'll all work out. Maybe, but sometimes the first most truthful response is just, ouch, I don't like this. And what interests me, I guess, speaking from my own experience on myself, is kind of what happens next? Like, what do I do next? And in simple terms, I'm just going to give a kind of a playful 3-part sequence. Like, okay, ouch, it happens. Number 2 is, okay, this is reality. I'm being forced to accept it. And then third is, which is more to do with movement. Okay, now what? And I do think those 3 simple steps can fundamentally change how we deal with the moments that we don't like when life doesn't go to plan. So let's break it down a little bit. I think the ouch step is, taking the pain, feeling the pain, not trying to bury it. Okay, I'm going to acknowledge something has happened. Maybe I'm really disappointed, I'm angry, I'm frightened, I'm upset, I'm embarrassed, maybe I'm heartbroken. There's no need to pretend otherwise. Ouch isn't weakness, it's human and it's honest. But then at a certain point after that comes the crucial second step, which is, okay, this is reality. And speaking from my own experience as a little human being and speaking from somebody who's worked with people over 30 years, I think this is where we can get stuck, because there's what happened and then there's our argument inside our head about what happened, as in, this shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have done that. This wasn't supposed to go this way. Why me? Why is the universe picking on me? If only blah, blah, blah. Why did I do it that way before? Oh, I'm so silly. I'm so stupid. On one level, you could say it's completely human, but here's the problem. Reality doesn't negotiate with us. And if you go up against reality, it's always going to win. If something has happened, there's no amount of inner mental argument that's going to change the fact that it's happened, of course. And I think this is where we need to make an important distinction. Because I remember hearing the phrase, well, you just need to accept reality. And that can be hard, but acceptance isn't approval. It's not saying, oh, this is fantastic, this is wonderful. I'm just going to accept it and it's going to be great. And it doesn't mean there's nothing I can do. It doesn't certainly mean giving up. Acceptance actually, to me, means, okay, this is true. This is reality. And this is where I'm starting from now. And it's only when we get to that point in a real sense that we can get to the third part of this really simple sequence, which is, okay, now what? Like, given that this is where I am now, what now? Like, what can I influence? What needs my attention? What's the next useful move? What's a conversation that needs to happen? Like, what do I need to change? What do I need to let go of? And sometimes the answer is action, but sometimes it's patience. And sometimes it's asking for help, especially if you're not used to doing that. And then sometimes there's nothing to fix at all. But now what I think gives us back an extra degree of agency, the ability to influence, to control something. Now, just to give you a very simple example, if you're driving to an important meeting and let's just say you left a little bit later than you probably should have, so you're cutting it fine, and then suddenly there's a traffic delay. Ouch. Then just watch your inner voice, watch the mind. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Why today? I should have left earlier. I'm going to be late. That means this, that means that. Oh, this is a disaster. And you can spend the next 30 minutes having an argument with yourself with a traffic jam. But unfortunately, the traffic just doesn't care. So, okay, this is reality. I'm here. The traffic isn't moving. Let me just accept that. This is reality. Okay, keep calm. Now what? Okay, call ahead. Make my apologies. Check another route. Move the meeting if necessary. Or maybe just sit there and wait. The external circumstances mightn't change at all, but in that simple, profound way, your relationship with those circumstances has changed. And that's where your resourcefulness starts to return. I remember actually when I in my weekly email that I'm referring to as a kind of a companion piece to this, I was telling a story about where I tore my Achilles completely. I had to have surgery. I couldn't drive for 3 months, and that's on my weekly email. It's on my website as well if you want to read it. And looking back, it was a really difficult time. Like, ouch. And it took me a little bit now to say, okay, hang on, can I accept reality? This is where I am. Now what? But so much good came out of that. I learned about myself, and also I got exposed to this technology called Zoom. But if you want to read about that, that's in the weekly email, and as I say, it's on my blog on my website. But the story I wanted to tell you here was I was working with a group of entrepreneurs about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And we'd broken into, we used to meet up once every 2 months, to look at business and life. And it's something that's called the Inner Circle. And in this particular morning, it was around 11 o'clock, we broke into small groups of maybe 3 or 4 people each. And I was moving around with different groups. There's 4 groups there. And I sat with one of the groups. And one of the entrepreneurs I knew was going through a difficult period. His business had encountered what to him felt like an existential problem. And he came in with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And it wasn't trivial, And so he was sharing with the group from where he was sitting that the future of the company was genuinely under threat. He was literally thinking of giving up and just shutting everything down and just changing direction. So he was very deflated and feeling sorry for himself. He was having what a friend of mine would call a pity party. So anyway, he was talking to this small group, and I was in that group as well. And everybody was listening to him attentively, and he was down, and he was kind of going on and on about it. And then when he was finished, another entrepreneur said, "Listen, I'd love to have your problem." And there was this moment of silence. I remember so well. It was a sunny day, we're outside, and you could have heard a pin drop. And then that guy explained some of what was happening in his business. And as it turned out, his problems were significantly more complex and serious. And so he looked at the first guy who had spoken, and he said exactly something like this: "Look, forgive me, but you need to man up, go back and sort that problem out." And I remember thinking to myself, we might have to break these two apart here, because I think the guy might swing and try and punch him. But something different happened. The first entrepreneur looked at him and paused and said, "You're right." And then he said, "Thank you." He said, "That's the best advice I've had in a long time." And I remember thinking, wow, like just straight talking hit this guy. And he went back to his business a different man. And I think what's fascinating to me is that the problem hadn't changed, not one bit. Same company, same threat, same circumstances, but something had changed in him. He'd stopped spending all of his energy fighting the fact that the problem existed. If you'd said to him, you need to accept the problem, he would have said you were crazy. But the reality was, he wasn't. He was doing a version of, why is this happening to me? I don't like this. But then he got to a version of, okay, this is reality. Now what? Like, he was stuck in the ouch, but he got out of that because of what the guy said. And then he became resourceful again and said, okay, now what? Now, this is the truth. Eventually, he turned that around. He got rid of the problem, turned it actually into a strength eventually. And a few years later, he sold that business for a very significant sum. And it was because of that turnaround. Now, I'm not telling you that every ouch ends in a fantastic business exit, because that wouldn't be true. And I'm not suggesting that everybody who's struggling needs somebody to tell them to man up, because sometimes that might be really bad advice. What mattered really in that moment was a shift in perspective, the most important shift, a shift in perspective. The guy got fresh eyes. He stopped fighting reality and he started working with it. Now, before I come to some questions to give for you for this week, in terms of your life, just a little note. I'm doing something new. I'm bringing in some new content because I suppose I've been inspired, and I'm kind of curious about a new direction where, the world has become, over the last 10 years, I think, obsessed and saturated with books, podcasts like this, and, everything and anything, online courses. But most people have been really educated on mindset and the mind, which I think is great. But that doesn't mean that you're going to move the dial consistently. Very often people will drift, and they just have this kind of feeling that there's still more in the tank. And I'll often ask people, like, what is the single biggest block or single biggest habit you should change? And people will go, they say lots of different things: time, mind, whatever, limiting beliefs. But the biggest habit is you. The single biggest habit to change is you, because we get in our own way. So I'm creating something that I'm calling Project You, which is going to be a 12-month online, live, interactive kind of group journey where we're going to explore beyond habits. We're going to go deep into the inner edge, into the inner world, in a meaningful way that will, I suppose, get more out of the tank for you. So I'm not going to say any more. If you're interested in any level, check out the link in the show notes around Project You, and you can register your interest, and we'll see what comes from there. So coming back to today and some questions for you. All right. So where's the ouch in your life right now? What hasn't followed your plan? Like, what's not going the way you want? What's the ouch? And then consider that and say, okay, hang on. Where am I still arguing with reality? Like, what are you wishing hadn't happened? Or what are you wishing for something that you wanted to happen that's not happening fast enough or the way you want? And just look at what you're actually saying to yourself about that. And then number 3, if you genuinely accept it, okay, this is what it is. This is reality. This is where I am. What becomes possible now? Maybe there's a conversation. Maybe there's an action. Maybe there's a decision to be made. Or maybe it's simply just a different way of meeting what's here, that you stop maybe winding yourself up about it. And even that release intention maybe brings something new in terms of clarity or ideas or just a fresh perspective. And I think, look, we all know in the cold light of day that life doesn't, always follow our plan. Businesses don't, people don't. Sometimes our bodies won't, relationships won't. The market certainly won't. Sometimes life gives you something that you'd never have chosen. And when that happens, ouch. Yeah, I don't like it either. But it does seem to me that if you feel it, acknowledge it, don't pretend that it doesn't exist, and get to a point where you kind of go, okay, this is reality. It's not forever though. Yeah, it might be here right now, but this is where I am. And then if you ask, right now what? Like, what's the wisest response available to me from here? Because as I said, acceptance isn't giving up. I think, to me, acceptance, and the way I'm trying to convey it, is the point from which useful action becomes possible. So, ouch, this is reality. Now what? And just to close out, you can't always choose, I guess, what life puts in front of you. None of us can. But once you stop arguing with where you are, you certainly get an increase in freedom to decide where you go next. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.